What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we have a Gravekeeper deck, and I think if you're a fan of this deck, this is the format that you should be playing it, because the amount of decks that are being played right now that Necro Valley just destroys on its own is absolutely absurd. The anti-meta strategy of this powerful deck is something that any graveyard-based deck cannot match, and in this more of a slow-paced format that we have right now, that do not have that much combo, you can actually thrive with a deck like this. So I'm going to show you the list that I've come up with. It's kind of a different spicy build that I haven't seen a lot of people play. It has a lot of text and I'm going to explain why I play them. So before we begin with the deck, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So to start off with the monsters, we play of course 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Spiritualist. This is the most important monster in the deck because it gives you access to Supernaturalist, which is the fusion monster, and the fusion monster not only does it protect your Necro Valley, but it also gives you advantage during the end phase. So you need to be able to fusion summon that monster as fast as possible, but it's not something that you absolutely have to do turn 1, because it's something that you can do, but there's one card that actually contradicts with it. I'm going to show you later, which actually is not that bad if you think about it, because if you just lock down your opponent, you don't need the fusion monster to win, just the one monster to beat down them. It's basically enough to win the game. So if you can summon this turn 1, it's perfectly fine, but if there's something that restricts you from doing it, do not feel bad about it. You can actually win with a lot of different versions of this particular strategy, because there are so many win conditions, and I will show you all of them pretty much very soon. 3 copies of Commandant. You need to get access to your Necro Valley as fast as possible. You need to max this out. Basically, you run 10 copies of Necro Valley, which I think are good enough, along with the draw power and the search power of the deck. So you're going to see turn 1 very, very often. Turn 2, this deck kind of struggles, which is why I'm playing a couple cards that I'm going to show you later once we get to the trap lineup that actually helps this deck play against a lot of decks, and especially combo decks, which is what this deck struggles against, because even if you're going first against combo, if they do not really rely on the grave so much, then it can still make a board and destroy you. Or if you're going second, that's absolutely the worst scenario, then you need something to be able to break their board. And I've completely made this deck just to be able to counter such stuff like that, because if the deck is strong against a few decks, what you need to do is make it strong against what it has a bad matchup with, so you can actually win more games. 3 copies of Recruiter. I like this card in this particular version because I play a lot of board wipes in the trap version, so if you have this in defense, like in the set monster, then you can just get a search with it, which is really, really good. You can also summon it and then basically crush it if you need to get your Commandant to the hand, which is another thing. Unfortunately, you cannot go into Almiraz with this card because it has 1200 attack. It'd been great if it had 1000, but still we get what we want. And this is a level 3 monster, which is actually important for a play. I'm going to show you with the next card, which is the 1 copy of Gravekeeper's Headman. This is a monster reborn. You summon it and you Wolfspark a Gravekeeper back from the grave. It's unaffected by Necro Valley, so you can get it anyway. And the cool thing about this recruiter is that level 3, and in decks that can actually summon rank 3s and rank 4s, like this one, you can make a Zeus play, which I'll show you once I get to the extra deck, which is very, very fun if you can actually pull it off, because Zeus is such a blowout that if you resolve it, then your opponent is just going to cry because they won't have anything on the field. So there are some niche things that you can do with this deck, but you don't really rely on the extra deck too much. They're just stuff that give you some utility in case they come up. For the spells, play 3 copies of Necro Valley. Basically, this is the best floodgate, this format. We have Eldritch, very, very good against Eldritch. You just get rid of all of their recursive ability because they cannot banish the traps from the grave to get new ones. Dino, they cannot use stuff like Overraptor second effect or Mist from the grave. Drytron, they cannot get back monsters from the grave because Drytron's greatest strength is that it has the ability to get back all of its resources every single turn from the grave. So this card single-handedly can win you games when you're playing against the right matchup, and this is why this deck is so good, because just summoning a beater, like a 2000-2100 beater, with this on the field, it's basically game against some decks. So if you back it up with some hand traps or with some traps, depending on the build you play, then you can win with just. I wouldn't recommend playing hand traps in this deck unless you're playing Impermanence. Impermanence is the only hand trap you can play in the deck because of Royal Tribute. If you play hand traps, then you're just risking getting them to the grave with Royal Tribute. So if you want to play hand traps in the deck, you can play Impermanence. I do not play hand traps. I don't think they're necessary. I will explain why in a little bit. 3 copies of Hidden Temples of Necro Valley. This is Vandy's Emptiness for the deck. If you get Necro Valley and a Gravekeepers on the field with this, then you basically win against combo decks, because Necro Valley doesn't stop everything, but this stops what Necro Valley doesn't stop. So if you're playing anything against like Infernoble or maybe Dragons or Virtual World, this card is just going to destroy them because they won't be able to play. 3 copies of Royal Tribute. This is another win condition of the deck. It's not that good against certain decks because, let's say for example, you use it against Drytron. Yes, they do play a lot of monsters, but top decking 1 Benton or a Preparation is basically enough for them to destroy you, but this Necro Valley keeps them in check. So if you use this against the Drytron player, then they're going to pretty much scoop if they can't get rid of Necro Valley, then they won't be able to get all those resources back from the grave. But but if they can't get rid of Necro Valley, then those monsters they get back from the graveyard are going to give the advantage back. But since you have Necro Valley on the field to have Resolved Royal Tribute, then it's basically game. Against Virtual World, this is enough to win you the game. It's not that good against Eldritch because you don't really want to get Eldritch to the grave. It's good to get Eldritch to the grave because sometimes if they use the Eldritch's first effect to get rid of your Necro Valley, and that's kind of be problematic. But if you get Eldritch to the grave, then they won't be able to get it through its own effect, but it's just that you won't get anything else in the grave because mostly they will play traps, so even if they have an Eldritch in the hand, they don't lose too much. But this card is actually a win button against certain decks and against a lot of decks, to be honest, so you have to max it out. And ever since this card has been at 3, the deck has been very sleeper deck that you can play in a certain format. Last format, I didn't think this deck was good enough, but in this format, it's definitely a really good deck. 3 copies of Necro Valley Throne. This card gives you a search, but it also has a cool effect that people forget about. If you have a lot of monsters in your hand, this gives you an extra normal summon, and because you play level 4s in the deck, you can actually go for rank 4 plays, and I do play a center rank 4, just one to make the Zeus play, in case I have some hands where I'll draw a lot of monsters, because 10 monsters may not seem like a lot, but there will be a couple of situations where you draw a lot of them, so you need to be able to make the most out of those hands as well. 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. This card is a must in this deck because you only care about one monster really in the extra deck, everything else is just utility, so you don't really mind banishing unless you banish all 3 copies of Supernaturalist, but even if that happens, you can still win because the deck is such a stunning version of a deck that you can just win with traps and floodgates, so you don't really need the extra deck, so you need to play this if you have access to it. 2 copies of Pot of Duality. This kind of contradicts with Supernaturalist and Spiritualist, like I said in the beginning of the video, but I think even if you cannot summon Supernaturalist turn 1, it's worth taking that minus for something that might give you a win condition, because there are so many different win conditions in the deck. You can dig for a Royal Tribute, you can dig for a Templars, even just digging for the Necro Valley if you don't have it is good enough to win against some decks, so I think having the extra consistency in a deck like this is good enough to the point of sacrificing some power turn 1 by not summoning your Supernaturalist, so this is why I played 2 Pot of Duality in the deck. You can play the new pot once it comes out in Blazing Vortex if you can afford it, which is something that is really good because you can choose which cards you banish from the extra deck, so it doesn't really matter, so you can even get a bigger dig for 6 cards, but still Pot of Duality works just as fine. And 1 copy of Terraforming. I wanted to max out the copies of Necro Valley. I would consider running set rotation, but I think that would be one more brick with the field spell that I would have to run to go with set rotation, so I think with 3 Commandant, 3 Throne, 1 Terraforming, and 3 Necro Valley, that's perfectly fine. You also play Draw Power, play Duality. You are going to see Necro Valley turn 1. If you don't see it, then that's basically being very unlucky. For the traps, I play 3 Imperial Tombs of Necro Valley. People don't really play this card, at least they don't max it out, but I think this card is really good for the certain version of the deck I'm playing, because I will show you just in a few, because I play 3 Imperial Tombs, I play 3 Solemn Strike, and the reason I max out on these cards is because they stop monster effects as a counter trap, so your opponent will not be able to respond after that, and I play 3 copies of Torrential Tribute and 3 copies of Needle Sealing. This is what deals with combo when going second. Even going first, these cards are blowouts. If you use these cards and resolve them, then you're basically going to win the duel. You just need to be able to know your opponent's choke point so you can use this to completely end their turn. And if you're going second, what you want to do is stop your opponent from negating those cards, and usually what we'll negate with is with monster effects. So this is why you play 3 copies of Imperial Tubes and 3 copies of Solemn Strike to be able to negate them, blow out their board, and this is why Recruiter is such a good card, because if you have set a Recruiter and you're in Torrential, you get a monster from your deck, and or if you have Needle Sealing, then you can just summon the Recruiter to blow it up, and then you will get a search this way, because Needle Sealing does not destroy set monsters, it destroys face-up monsters. So this is why these cards, the trap lineup is here to make sure that I don't lose to combo, and I use the actual engine of the deck to win against the deck that Necro Valley beats. For the extra deck, play 3 copies of Supernaturalist, amazing card. It gets attack power, it protects your Necro Valley, and it gives you searches. This card is absolutely insane. If you can keep this on the field for a long time, you're going to win the game very, very soon. For the Xyz monsters, play 1 copy of Heartland Draco and 1 copy of Nightmare Shark. These two are the ones I usually summon when I want to go to Zeus, because these cards can attack your opponent directly. So I summon Heartland Draco by using Throne to extra normal summon maybe a second Spiritualist or a Commandant and Spiritualist if I have a lot of monsters in the hand, and I use the Headman with Recruiter to go into Nightmare Shark, and these two of course go into the 1 copy of Zeus. Zeus, if you resolve this card against pretty much anything, you're going to win the game. Unfortunately, you cannot use this effect more than once, like in Zoo in this particular deck, because it will only have 2 materials, because these two, in order to attack directly, they need to detach 1, so they will only have the Xyz monster and the 1 material left of them, but still using its effect once. If you don't need to use it during your own turn, you can keep the materials to use them as disruption during your opponent's turn. So this is why in anything that can summon rank 4, rank 3, I think if you have access to Zeus, you should start playing stuff like Heartland Draco and Nightmare Shark, because you're going to win a lot of games just with this. For the Link monsters, the Link monsters do not really come up a lot in this deck. You just play them for random utility that could possibly come up in 1% chances. So we play 1 IP Masquerena, play 3 Nightmares, Cerberus, Phoenix, Unicorn. These 3 can come up, especially with Headman, because there are some scenarios where you can get 2 monsters on the field quite easily. 3 I think is a little bit overkill, but just play them just in case you go into a super grind game with a lot of monsters on the field. kill, which could happen. And for the link force, play 1 Apollousa, 1 Avramax. I play Avramax in pretty much everything I play Masquerena with, because if you can summon Avramax with Masquerena, there are some decks that cannot deal with it. 1 Boral Sword, 1 Boralord, and 1 Zero Boros. So yeah, that's the deck, guys. It's a really good deck with this format. If you're a fan of it, if you liked it, I think this is your only chance of playing it, because if the format changes, if we go back into a combo format, then this deck doesn't do a lot, because you absolutely have to rely on Temples and Royal Tribute, but these cards are unsearchable. So of course, Temples, you can search them with Supernaturals during the end phase, but that's very slow. So if Necro Valley just can single-handedly win you games, then this is a format that you should be playing this deck. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, comment down below which decks would you like to see next, and we'll see you next time.